The first major test of the summer marching season ends without major incident. The Summit of 8 ends in Denver with the issuing of a final communique. And championship match interrupted. Overcrowding forces thousands of fans onto Croke Park. Good evening. A controversial Orange Order parade through the mainly Catholic town of Balahy in County Derry has passed off peacefully. A large force of RUC officers kept the Orangemen and Nationalists apart as both sides staged protests against the police action. Two other Orange marches in Catholic areas of Armagh and Tyrone were also blocked by the security forces.
The RUC were out early and in force in Balahy. 500 officers, including riot squads, forming a buffer zone in the town's main street to keep the opposing sides apart. Nationalists, who say the town is 95% Catholic, wanted the Orange Order parade rerouted away from the area, and residents staged a peaceful protest to make their point. The protesters argued that the RUC action amounted to a day-long curfew on the Catholic population.
We blame the RUC for this presence here, but we also blame the Orange Order for creating this by refusing to get into dialogue with us. Like the Orange Order keeps telling us about their rights to march, their civil right to march. We have our civil rights here as nationalists. This is a 95% nationalist village, and we should not be treated like this by just to facilitate an Orange Order.
200 yards away at the other end of Balahy, the Orangemen found what they insist is their traditional route through the town, blocked by RUC Land Rovers. Orange Order leaders said the restrictions amounted to a denial of their human rights.
We asked that Article 14, freedom from discrimination and the enjoyment of convention rights and freedoms, be fully implemented.
Their protest made, the Orangemen then turned and walked away from further confrontation. The RUC strategy here in Balahy today has been one of containment aimed at avoiding confrontation. It's a tactic which may well be employed again as the marching season progresses. Whether it will meet with wider success, of course, only time will tell. Later, two other controversial Orange parades in nationalist areas of Tyrone and Armagh were also blocked by the police.
Sinn Féin's Martin McGuinness has reacted strongly to criticism of the Republican movement following last week's murder of two policemen in Lurgan. Speaking in Bodenstown in County Kildare, he also said the new British government had been more positive than their predecessors, but he added that decommissioning was still a major stumbling block.
Last Monday's killings of two RUC men in Lurgan have had huge repercussions in the increasingly tense atmosphere in the north. Yesterday, Tony Blair revealed that just 2 days before the killings, Sinn Féin were offered a seat at the talks table if the IRA declared a ceasefire and held it for 6 weeks. Today saw the Sinn Féin Wolf Tone commemoration at Bodenstown in County Kildare. Sinn Féin's Martin McGuinness reacted strongly to criticism of the Republican movement in the light of last week's shootings.
Some of our, I think, deepest critics in the course of the last weeks have been those people who have been most critical of the peace process for the last number of years. And all of that, I think, runs off me like a water off a duck's back. I do recognise, I have to say, that in the wider spectrum of people which are out there, people are very worried and seriously concerned.
Martin McGuinness said the new British government was adopting a more positive approach than its Conservative predecessors. He said Sinn Féin would also adopt a positive approach, but added that decommissioning remains the biggest stumbling block to progress. Also today, the chairman of the multi-party talks, Senator George Mitchell, reiterated his commitment to the talks process, though he conceded that the pace had been painfully slow.
Most of the participants in the talks have come to the conclusion that there can't be another year like the past year, that there has to be some demonstrable activity moving forward into substantive discussions. I think it's possible. It's obviously very difficult, but I think it's still possible. Otherwise, I wouldn't be going back.
The British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, has said his government has a responsibility to ensure the rule of law is upheld during this summer's marching season. Speaking in Denver at the end of the Summit of World Leaders, he described the violence surrounding last year's marches as appalling. The Denver summit ended just over an hour ago when the leaders issued their final communiqué.
Tony Blair took to the streets of Denver this morning to press the flesh. His confident performance at this summit has been best expressed in his statements on Northern Ireland. Today he appeared on American television to explain his commitment to the peace process.
You know, I got a letter from a little girl just a couple of days ago who just said to me, do whatever you can for peace in Northern Ireland. I've only had 1 year of peace in my life.
And with rising tensions ahead of the marching season, he said the rule of law must be upheld.
But in respect to the parades, yes, you're quite right. Of course we've got a responsibility to make sure that the rule of law is upheld. And, you know, again, let me emphasise, the vast bulk of people, whether they're Catholics or Protestant, want that.
As well as Northern Ireland, this summit focused attention on other trouble spots, with the world's leaders agreeing a common approach to Bosnia and the Middle East. But there was less unity when it came to environmental protection, with disagreements over a European proposal to limit global warming.
The United States opposed the proposal for a radical cut in so-called greenhouse gases, and the final communique contained an uneasy compromise. But President Clinton brought attention to what had been agreed and the symbolic importance of these summits.
We leave Denver renewed by our strength, the strength of our common efforts to prepare our people to succeed in the global economy and the global society of the 21st century.
Most of these leaders will travel to New York this week for the UN Earth Summit, where the environment will again be center stage.
Overcrowding forced the evacuation of thousands